Hello and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography program at the School of Visual Arts. We are thrilled to have photographer Jennifer McClure as tonight's guest speaker. After completing her BA in English, Theory, and Literature from the University of Florida, Jen went on to study at the School of Visual Arts and the International Center of Photography. She has been awarded Center's Editor's Choice in 2013 and has been exhibited in numerous shows across the country, most recently at the Griffin Museum of Photography, where we were shown together. It's always nice. The Los Angeles Center of Photography, the Ogden Museum of Southern Art, Front Gallery in New Orleans, Photo Festival Leiden in the Netherlands, and at Photoville in New York. Jen has lectured at Photo Fusion and at Columbia Teachers College, and her work has been featured in publications such as Lens Scratch, Feature Shoot, L'Œil de la Photographie, The Photo Review, Dwell, and PDN. Looking at Jen's work, I am always struck by the honesty and candor. I admire the depth of feeling in her images, and she manages to strike a chord of absolute longing that I think resonates with all of us. So please help me welcome Jennifer McClure to our lecture series.
Can you guys hear me?
What?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that lovely introduction. That was so sweet. And thank you all for coming out. I know how busy you all are, so it's an honor that you all showed up for this. I'm very flattered. I wanted to start with a photo that was pivotal in my development as a photographer. Class picture day in kindergarten. I had big glasses. I was coming around the cubbyhole. Someone was coming the other way and they broke my glasses. And I was devastated because the photo was not going to be perfect. I knew even then how important it was to have every detail right in a photo, and I was a mess. We took another one later, and I wasn't prepared, and I was wearing a Cap and Crunch t-shirt. I couldn't find that for you. This was my first art-directed self-portrait. My brother was the button pusher. Cindy Sherman had button pushers. I like to feel like Cindy Sherman and I were on the same page even then. This is from around 2003. In between the first self-portrait and here, I went to college. I got a degree in English. I thought I was going to be a professor. I'd always taken photos when I was growing up, and I had a big wall, and I would put them all up on the wall because my dad was a Marine and we moved constantly. So the photos on the wall were a way for me to remember where I'd been, who my friends were, what happened. But when I got to college, it just didn't seem like photos could be a career. I didn't have any notion that I could do something with that. It didn't occur to me I couldn't do anything with an English degree either until much later. There was one class for non-majors. I could never wake up early enough to register, so I learned how to take photographs through the independent newspaper there. I remember driving out to a field in Florida where a woman had a trailer with a darkroom, and I fell in love with the photography. But then I moved to New York, and I was a mess for a lot of years. And I had no idea what I was doing, what direction I was taking. Eventually, after I turned 30, I realized I needed to pay attention to the things that gave me joy at some point in my life, and I started taking photos again. And this was the old camera I used, the Pentax, the K1000. And I made a lot of awful photos. I think it's important to share these so we know where we all started. Photos like this, like this, like this, like this. This one I actually don't mind. This was one of the first photos I ever took where I was like, there's something going on here. You know, maybe there is something you can do. Well, hello. So I was just taking classes at School of Visual Arts for the technical. Every now and then a portrait class. I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew I loved it. I knew there was magic in the air, and I knew I had to keep going. This is when I thought I was Richard Avedon. This is when I thought I was Deanne Arbus. I thought I was Elliot Erwitt. And these this is from my second self-portrait shoot as an adult. The first one was for an assignment, and I was wearing a big hat, and I had a cat at the time, and I held the cat in front of my face, and there's no record of it because I think I destroyed them, and my teacher said, "Where are you in here?" So I tried again, and this was the beginning of the self-portraits as an adult. I took a lot more awful pictures between that and what I'm going to show you next, but you get the idea. This photo was important because it started a different direction in the photography. Prior to this, I was just all over the place. I was shooting everything, bicycles in the snow. Like, there was no concept, there was no project, there was no direction. And I had no idea what I was doing. This photo was a shift. You can sort of see it on there. My hand there is bruised and swollen. I used to drink way too much and get in a lot of trouble. And one night, there were a lot of nights I hurt myself, but there was one night in particular where I fell and I really hurt my hand, and it swelled up like a bear paw, and it was a disaster. And that was and I don't know why, but I took photos of that, and it's not something I'd ever done before. And it was the first time I had been in pain and taken a photograph and realized it could make me feel better. It could make me see the situation in a different light. So that was the beginning of self-portraits. But even then, I wasn't quite ready to go there yet. But it did begin the next project. Well, my first project, the first work I ever did with a project in mind. So even though when I look back on it now, it's as clear as daylight that I had a drinking problem, at the time I still thought, I don't know, I'm good, I just work in a restaurant, that's all. And I didn't think I had a problem. So I decided what I wanted to do was hang out with and photograph people who clearly did have some sort of a problem and were willing to admit it and talk to me about it. So I put an ad on the back page of the Village Voice when that was still a paper, and some people answered, and I would go and hang out with them, like for a day at a time. And I would go back a couple times, and I would shoot. And they're not the best photos in the world. And, I'm not saying that for any, they're not. It was very early in my career. When I look back on it, it makes me cringe because I could have done better. But it was important as a project to get me where I needed to be and to learn how to put myself in these situations. And it was also a valuable learning experience on a personal level because, I can't remember who said this. Who was it that said the camera gives you a license? Does anybody remember? Was that Arbus?
Passport.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so you have the camera in your hand and you've agreed you're going to shoot, and I would go hang out with everybody and I could ask them all the questions that I couldn't really ask myself. And we both knew what we were there for, so we were brutally honest with each other. And that was amazing. The honesty blew my mind. So we'll just go through these pretty quickly. And what I learned from going back day after day and photographing the same people was that nothing ever changed. We hung out and did the same thing every single time, and they talked about everything they were going to do when they weren't high. And then I would come back the next time and it was the same thing. They'd talk about what they were going to do when they weren't high. And by the end of it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I sound like. And there came a certain point where I realized, I'm done. Like, I shouldn't be here. Like, it was very obvious to me that I did have a problem at that point, which was the lesson I got from this whole project. And I did take this project around and show a couple of people because, it was so important to me, and I couldn't understand how it wasn't important to everybody in the world. But, this is also around the time when Jessica Dimmock's project came out. Do you guys remember that one, The Ninth Floor? And that was so good. It was an amazing project. And it deserved all the recognition it got. And, but everybody who looked at this said to me, well, have you seen Jessica Dimmock's work? I was like, all right. I get it. But this was also important for me to learn how to photograph other people. Just show up at a stranger's house and walk in and hang out. And when do you pick up your camera? How do you pick it up? Do you direct? Do you not? I did a couple other projects after that. I don't want to bore you with all of them, but I did want to show you this one because I started photographing myself again. But I still wasn't able to really look at myself with the camera. So I was putting myself on all these objects. Brad remembers these. So I had a good time with these. These were kind of fun. This one's kind of funny. I had a temper tantrum in the grocery store because they added all this extra frosting. Do you guys see that there? It was supposed to be down below, and I'm in the grocery store just literally almost in tears. I was a wreck, arguing with somebody with this dumb face looking up at me from the cake. And I realized the whole thing was ridiculous, and I just had to go shoot what I had. So one of my ideas, I had a shot list. One of my early shots on the list was to hold the cake up in front of my face and shoot it. And I forgot about gravity. And so I got 3 shots of the one on the left, tried to hold it up, and it fell to the floor. And this is when I was using a shutter release that I hit my toe on the button. So I didn't have the wherewithal to actually do it when it was falling, but in the second after I got it. And that's the shot we ended up with. It was a Rubik's Cube before and after. It's about not being able to get what you need. And I had such fun with these, you know. I didn't know what they were, where they were going. You know, I put stickers of myself all over Paris. I went everywhere. As Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir's grave. And I'm showing you this work because it leads to this idea. I'll read it for you. I know it's hard to read in the back. Of all the pitfalls in our paths and the tremendous delays and wanderings off the track, I want to say that they are not what they seem to be. I want to say that all that seems like fantastic mistakes are not mistakes. All that seems like error is not error. It all has to be done. That which seems like a false step is the next step. And so I didn't know it at the time. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that this was fun and I loved it. And it never went anywhere. I mean, now it's, you know, something I show in a slideshow as a joke. But it was important because it got me to where I needed to be for the next one. And this is not the name of the next body of work I did, but that's the overwhelming feeling. Because shortly after I was finishing that project, I got pretty sick. And it wasn't deathly ill, but it was the kind of chronic illness that just leaves you exhausted. And no doctor really has any answer, and it takes a long time to get somewhere to where you feel better. So I was just so tired I didn't even know what to do, and it was hard to leave the house. And I tried to make pictures about it. And I mean, I did my best here. And I thought I was going to do something with these, but the thing about a project like this is that as heavy and as tired as I felt, that's what came across in the photos. And this was an important lesson too, because I realized, I mean, whatever you're feeling or whatever your subject is feeling, it's going to come across with or without any kind of direction. And that's when I realized how powerful emotions can be in photographs. And this one I kind of, again, these are not the best pictures in the world, but it's just important, I feel like, to show the progression. So for this one, I used to shoot with hardware lights that I would get. You know, you get those silver reflectors and just a bulb on a cord. And so I had this set up, and I tried to gel it. And I know nothing about lighting. I didn't have a lot of training in this. So I had it clipped up there with something, and I was laying on the floor trying to shoot it, and then it just fell on top of me. And I was so frustrated, I just kept hitting that thing with my toe. And I ended up looking like I was a frozen piece of ice. And I was like, those are the happy accidents that you all wish for and you can't plan for. And you have to be open to just shooting, even when you think everything's ridiculous and awful. And so a lot of these are about feeling old before my time and feeling like I was a ghost in my own life. And again, you know, I would show these to people, and I could see sometimes by the time they got to the end of these, they were just like, oh. It wasn't pleasant for either one of us. And I was like, all right. maybe we're going to let these go. And then, so after all these, I started to feel better. And I started to feel like I wanted to get my life back on track, and I started to think that maybe I was ready to date again. And I started looking back at a lot of my past relationships and why they didn't work, maybe what they had in common there. And what I realized is that they were all fairly short. And I never got in there too deep. You know, as soon as things got real, I would get out, you know, as quickly as I could. And so I started this project thinking, I'm going to find out what's wrong with all of these men that I dated. What do they have in common? That was the goal. Oh, man. How did I not see that? So, you know, I'm a big fan of short stories and poems because I feel like often photographs and photographic series can be short stories and poems, whether by themselves or as a group. So there was a Raymond Carver short story that I love called Gazebo, and it's about a couple that goes to a hotel room and they stay up all night and they decide to hammer it out. Are they going to break up? Are they going to stay together? What are they going to do? And I couldn't get that image out of my mind. And I thought, hotel rooms, man, that's what I have to do. Because hotel rooms are short stay, you know, and they're not lived in. There's no personal items around. And I didn't want that. I didn't want, you know, a family photo in the background or someone's favorite poster or anything that made the set look lived in. So I thought hotels are perfect. I'll do that. So I would get hotel rooms, and I decided to use friends and family. And what we were going to do was go through all the breakups, just like they did in the short story. We were going to reenact the breakup or somehow reenact the emotion, you know, and try and get through that. And I would show up early or I would stay after. I always stayed the night, and I would just shoot. And I love that high, you know. It's just 24 hours of shooting with a little nap in the middle. And that's when magic happens too, when you just push yourself beyond where you think you can go. So I started out shooting at the Chelsea Hotel because every room is different. It was awesome. And then that closed. That was hard. The unavailable man. And this one's a little hard to see, but he's you can see the wedding ring there. And it was interesting sometimes because when we got in these rooms, we would talk to each other about, okay, I'd say, this is your part, this is who you represent, and sometimes we would end up actually talking to each other like the characters. And I say character because it felt like I was going back somehow. And it was weird because, you know, like I said before, I would always bolt and run. There was no closure. There was no debriefing or exit interview. There was nothing. It was just gone. So this was like an exit interview, but really kind of painful. So I got to hear all these things that people never got to say to me, and it was kind of devastating. But it was also really, and I got to say things I never said to people too. That was pretty great. This makes me really miss that hotel. I mean, how do you take a bad picture in a room like that? And these are, I used to bring these Chinese lanterns everywhere. You know, those big white paper ones, and I would just hang a light bulb. I let a couple I singed. That did happen. So you just hang the light bulb in there, and you can put it on a dimmer. What's that movie with Scarlett Johansson in Tokyo? Lost in Translation. I believe that whole entire movie was shot with those Chinese lanterns. And that was beautiful. I copy a lot of my stuff from movies. I do some research and try and find the light. And a lot of times I would go to these hotel rooms, and they wouldn't be the one that I saw on the website when I picked it out. And I'd go downstairs again. I'd say, I'm so sorry, it's our anniversary. It's a very special evening. Is there anything you can do? This one was in Paris. And my good friend Brad introduced me to a woman over there who knew an artist. And we showed up at this hotel room in the morning. He didn't speak a word of English. I don't speak any French. She gave us an intro and explained what we were doing, and she split. And so he and I are standing there looking at each other, and we're like, and he was an actor, thank goodness. But that was one of the more fascinating shoots we've ever done. Just realizing how important the body language is in these kinds of shoots. And again, it's not about the language, it's about the emotion. That's my nephew, because I used to like to date man children. This one took forever. I had to find the right gray room, gray outfit. It was all about ambivalence. I was like, it has to be perfect. And this one looks dangerous, but there was a ledge right outside, a little garden ledge. Smoke and mirrors here. This one was a pay-by-the-hour motel. I mean, if you guys ever need hotel recommendations in the city for anything, I can help you. And so by the time I got to the end of this series, this is a screenshot from the whole thing. By the time I got to the end and put all these together, I realized the problem here, I mean, if you take a look, like I'm in the middle in all of these. I didn't know I was doing this while I was shooting, but that's what I was also doing with all of these relationships. It was all about me. I was in the middle. I was the writer, I was the star, I was the director, I was the producer. And if somebody dared show up and improvise, I was like, whoa, 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 this is too real. I gotta go. So that was a huge important lesson, you know, just how to let other people participate and get rid of this whole fantasy. So as one does after they do a series like that and realize perhaps they are the problem in all their relationships, I started going to therapy immediately after that. And then I began this next series. And this one was a little different because with the series prior, I had, you know, a list of these people I had dated, and I was going to cross all them off and get to the bottom of them, and there was that. With this one, I had no game plan. I had no shot list. You know, I was just writing and writing and writing and writing, and then shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting. And this one is called Laws of Silence. When something is festering in your memory or your imagination, laws of silence don't work. It's like shutting a door and locking it on a house on fire in hope of forgetting that the house is burning. While I was going through this, I was also reading obsessively, and I was reading Tennessee Williams. There's a few other pieces in here. I'll point them out as we go. So this is basically about figuring out why I had such unsuccessful relationships and where that started and what happened. And of course, it does go back to the parents a lot of times. And so I started to realize, like, my parents had sold me on this idea that I had a happy childhood, but meanwhile I have all these letters and stuff where they're like, you were such a difficult baby, and you're such a problem, and you did this, and you did that, and we knew there was something wrong with you, and I'm like, wait a minute, something's not working here. And as I also looked back on it too, I realized my parents really sold, marriage and kids and family and religion and the house, but I was looking at them and I'm like, neither one of you are happy. Like, you're not really selling this as a whole. I'm not buying it. So I started to do some digging, and it had a lot of strange consequences. We had a lot of awkward family conversations, but I did kind of find out that there was a lot wrong with my childhood, and there was a lot of anger, and there was some neglect, and there was there's a lot of emotional stuff that goes on. And it was rewarding because I felt like I wasn't crazy. And I finally realized this, I was right. I was a lonely and anxious little kid, and now I realized there was a reason for all this. I wasn't out of my mind. Sorry, this is a really long introduction to this body of work, but sometimes it doesn't make sense without all this. So, this is from a diary entry. It says, I feel small. I wanted you to love me more than you did. There's a lot of water images in this series. I had a bad experience in the water when I was a kid, and I was always afraid to go too deep. And that's pretty much how I was with all of my relationships in my adult life. So this was a departure from every series I'd done before, and that it was much more conceptual. And I never knew what it meant while I was shooting it. And it was hard to find a direction to go when I got stuck. And it's not until I worked with a really fantastic editor at the end that it all started to make sense. That one's about holding your own self back. And again, that whole American dream thing that I just was not buying. And I did have help on some of these, the button pusher. I definitely, this one I couldn't have taken by myself. There's no way. Did I explain this properly? Does this make sense with the photos? Okay. You never know. It's such a personal project. Like, I never know if it's coming across the way I intended. That's another pay-by-the-hour motel, FYI. That's from the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which I used to read obsessively as well. I wasn't sure why I identified with this middle-aged bachelor who never found love. Those are all of my high school corsages, which I had no idea that I saved, and letters from boys. That was my actual music box from when I was a kid. And it's hard when you make work like this because it is so personal. You don't know really who cares. And I even took it to some portfolio reviews, and I had people say to me, why should I care? And that's a hard question. I was like, well, I don't know. And then I have other people I show it to, and they're like, oh my God, I totally get this. So it's just, it's an important lesson about your work. You're not going to please everybody all the time. And now that I've been doing this for a little while, if people tell me they don't get my work, I'm like, that's fine. That's great. Thank you. Thanks for looking. It's okay. This one was taken at the rain room. It's about walking through the raindrops. I had a friend who used to say that to me all the time, like whether it was emotional or physical, she'd say, walk between the raindrops. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So, we did this project that had all this pain and angst, and I was talking to a friend of mine and the editor who looked at my work, and she said, something's missing, you need healing. And so I flew to Iceland and went to the Blue Lagoon and got permission to do a shoot. We looked at places all over the world, and this was the only one we could work because I didn't drive. And again, the Tennessee Williams, the streetcar named Desire. My parents started calling me a spinster when I was in my early 20s. This is Florida, the Spanish moss outside their house. This is a letter from my grandmother asking me when I'm going to find a husband. I was 22. And this is a healing temple. People went to offer their prosthetics. It was in New Orleans. And that one was really hard to make because all my cameras were failing, and I had an underwater easy share thing that I just held up and hoped for the best. And it actually worked. And so this project was incredibly healing for me because it got me to a place where I realized all these things that I thought were failings about myself weren't at all. You know, what they were was someone else's ideas of how I should live my life. And so doing this whole project let me identify those and then kind of set them free and let them go on their way. Louise Bourgeois is one of my favorites, and she always talks about emotion and work and how important it is and how if you feel it, it will come across, and I do believe that. She says art is restoration. The idea is to repair the damages that are inflicted in life, to make something that is fragmented, which is what fear and anxiety do to a person, into something whole. And that's kind of always what it has been for me, because I make work about something that keeps me awake at night. You know, when you're lying in bed and you can't sleep and the same thoughts keep running through your head, the only way I can get rid of those is to make some kind of work about it. And that's what that project did for me. I felt like I was something whole by the end of this. Instead of someone who was lacking, I felt like I was complete and I was fine. Which leads us to the next series, the single series. So after realizing that I'd been, sold a bill of goods that was a lemon, I started to think about this idea of being single and about solitude and about what that meant. And this is a complicated issue, and I'm still working on this project, so forgive me if my thoughts are a little bit scattered. But, in America especially, we're sold this idea too. Like, it's not just my parents, it comes from everywhere. It's on television, it's in movies, it's in car commercials, it's everywhere you go, that you need to be paired up with somebody. If you're paired up with someone, you're happy and everything's great. And that's the goal. I even started researching singles cruises. And on the photos for the singles cruises, it shows two people together. Singles cooking classes, they show two people cooking together. So even activities that are geared towards singles are geared towards singles finding someone else. And people who are just single and happy seem to be a threat to people, not all of them, obviously, it's a sweeping generalization. But they can be a threat to people who are not. And the idea that single people are happy and not a problem that needs to be fixed is still not common enough. It should be a lot more common, I think. And I've done a lot of reading on this, and it's hard for me to talk about it because I don't know whether to talk about the statistics and the sociological aspects of it or more of the emotional aspects of it. So I do kind of go back and forth. But the truth is more and more people are single now than ever before. So it is something we're all going to have to start thinking about. Whether people are married and divorced or never married, single people are the majority these days. So I decided I wanted to hang out with all kinds of single people and find out what they thought about it, whether they were happy about it, whether they were looking, whether they'd given up, whether they were taking a break. And so I started out with a set of questions that I gave everybody. And we did it. We talked a lot in person, but I always told everybody what we talk about amongst each other is private, but what you write might go out into the world, because I'm very concerned about people's privacy. And I'm also very concerned in this day and age about comments, because you do have to expect that one day your work is going to go online and there will be comments. And I wanted people to have a measure of control over how they're representing themselves to the world. So we would do these questions, you know, what's your most favorite part about being single? What's your least favorite? How long have you been single? Do you feel pressure? And in the beginning, I would shoot everybody in their apartments. And I showed it to an editor. She was like, why are you doing this? This is getting boring. I was like, well, that's where I feel the most single. She said, no, 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 no. You have to go and shoot everybody where they feel the most single. And then once I started doing that, I was like, holy moly, I love this project again. And so that's where we are with this. And I think I mean, never say never, but I think I might be done shooting this one. It's just a matter of figuring out how to talk about it, what to title it. So we'll go through. And each of these sessions are kind of like a date. You know, I show up and we hang out and we talk. We go to a bar, have a cup of coffee, we do something. We get to know each other, and then we kind of look at each other. We're like, all right, do you want to do this? Should we, you know? And some people I keep in touch with after. Other people want nothing to do with me. Yeah, some people I ask for a second date because I didn't quite get it right the first time. And sometimes they say yes, but I also get ghosted. And it's funny because a lot of this can be like a Rorschach test, you know? I did a little mini residency in Texas, and I had about 16 of these up on the wall. And some people would come in and go, oh my God, everybody looks miserable. And other people would come in and go, wow, this is so great. Look how happy everybody is. I was like, wow, that's intense. And one of the funny things about this work, and the interviews too, and I don't know if I've shown this necessarily as well as I could, but you know, when I ask people what their most favorite aspect of being single is, they say their freedom. And then when I ask people what their least favorite aspect of being single is, they say being alone, which is also their freedom. And sometimes people told me the most amazing stories while we were hanging out, and I knew I couldn't use them, and it broke my heart. Like this guy was in an arranged marriage that he broke up and had to pay the bride's family hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then I gave him his interview, and he did yes, no, yes, no. And I swore I had no yes or no questions in there. And he did. She dates married men. And it's hard with editing these because I feel like people, you know, they share so much of themselves, and it kills me every time I have to take somebody out of the group. You know, I feel like they've given me this gift, and then if I didn't get a portrait that was good enough, I feel like I failed, and it just kills me. Which I guess is, you know, when you have a bad date sometimes. She didn't want a second date. And so many people had pets. I went back and forth over whether or not to show these. But I figured you've got to have one in there. But there were so many people who were just stiff and wooden and nothing would happen. And then I put my camera down, they'd open the door and let their dog in. And then they were a different person entirely. I was like, all right, we got to have one or two of these in here. And it is really hard to try and match a setting to a person's emotional state. And it didn't always work. Sometimes you show up and you try everything in your power, and you just can't get the two to jibe. But every now and then, like, something happens, and you're like, I couldn't have asked for something better than that. And when I first started shooting these, everything was very literal, very straight on. And as I kept going with these, like it's, you know, I had to shoot that out of my system, all these straight on shots. And also about halfway through, someone looked at all those and they said, yeah, it looks like the real estate section of the New York Times. And I was gutted. I was like, oh, that's not the emotional magic I was going for. So I had to rethink entirely where I was going with this. And you know, sometimes you show up for a date and the person just goes, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I'll do whatever you want to do. What do you want to do? I'll eat anything. What do you want to do? And then other people, you show up and they're like, I'd like to go here. I like this. And those are like the photographic subjects where you're like, ah, thank you. And that is actually the Met. That is not her house, as some people assume. In case you were feeling bad about your New York City apartment. And this was luck. We had 15 minutes. We had to run through here with the camera and just hope for the best. And that is actually my ex-boyfriend, which was a difficult shoot. Look, I have a smiling photo. She was lovely. She's actually a cop in the Bronx and a poet. She was fascinating. This guy very proudly told me he slept with 100 women. He was very excited. He considered that his life's greatest work, especially considering he's not that tall and not that handsome. I mean, it could have been a lie, I don't know, but it was a good story. So I sat there with him and I went along with it for the entire time and asked him all these questions. But he was kind of cool. So I was like, really? You say you're going to call and you just don't? He was like, yes. I was like, I knew it. There wasn't an accident. Your phone didn't get cut off. I knew it. All those lines. And a lot of times, you know, in these interviews, a lot of the same situations kept coming up again and again. And then it's a matter of how do you photograph that? How do you really show that? And I felt awful that I cut this guy's head off, but it was a better photo. You know, the cooking alone is something that came up over and over. And the eating alone. And you know, this is a case where I went in with big plans and all these lights and my flashes and bounces and everything I could think of, and nothing was working. And then, you know, she crawled under the covers and did that, and I knocked the lampshade off the lamp by her bed and tipped it over. And I think that worked better than anything I had planned. This woman is a piece of art. She kind of blew me away. And this man was a confirmed bachelor and a writer. He had one of the best interviews I've ever read. I do need to figure out how I'm going to put the text with these, whether I'm going to caption or whether I'm going to layer it in and out. You know, maybe we don't have the text next to the person who said it. Maybe you just pull the best pieces. There's a lot of possibility here. And it's harder to get men to do this than women, I think, as you would expect. So I'm always just blown away when a man does agree to do it and shares a lot.
I'm sorry, what do you mean harder to do it? To agree to do the piece or to open up and pose for the photo the way you want?
To agree to do the piece in the first place.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. He asked whether it's harder to get a man to open up while we're shooting or harder to get a man to agree. And it's harder to get a man to agree to even go through the process. And a lot of men agree, and then it comes down to, I give them the questions, and sometimes they never send the questions back. Sometimes they fill out the questions and go, wow, that was cathartic. And then I try to arrange the shoot, and I never hear back from them. Much more so than for women as well. And then I had to put myself in there as well. And we're back in a hotel room. Everything always comes full circle. I mean, this is the kind of project where I was asking a lot of people, and I had to give a lot of myself as well. It's just like a date. You can't show up for a date and just go, You've got to talk about yourself and reveal stuff about yourself too. So I did feel like it was important to put myself in the project also. Sorry, I had to change it. I didn't want to look at, So when I first started this project, I put an ad on Craigslist in the platonic section. And that turned out to be a crazy idea. I'll read it for you. How do you feel about being single? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you trying to stay single or looking to couple up? I'm doing a photo project on all kinds of single people, looking for many different perspectives. I'm female and single, but this is completely platonic. Send me an email and we'll talk. I'm interested in your story. And I got tons of responses. Most people just wanted to talk, and that was it. I did get some stuff like this. Hello, looking for a strictly platonic relationship to be used as a toilet. You can come over, drink wine forever, then when you have to pee, just do it in my mouth. Then we continue a friendly chat. Would you be interested in this type of relationship? I got Netflix too. 34-year-old white male here. I got Netflix too. As if I was on the fence, oh, Netflix. Netflix. We'll watch Kimmy Schmidt after. That's awesome. So then, there was a lot of back and forth and a lot of writing. I spent a lot of time doing this. So this guy and I had exchanged several emails. And then we get down to the point where I'm like, well, what about,
This is a different guy than the
Different guy, yeah, different one. So this is what I wrote. I think a lot of people in New York feel that way, that they work all the time and don't enjoy what they've earned. I understand. So let me know if you would like to do a photo. Take some time and think about it. I can usually do Fridays and Saturdays. He wrote back, I really don't understand what you're saying. I wrote back, the whole point of the ad is that I would like to make a photo of the people who respond. And he wrote back, respond about what? And that happened over and over. One guy is like, I said I'm shooting people in their apartments, but we should meet and talk first. He's like, why don't we meet in my car? I'm like, oh my God. So after that, I started going to social media. And so, I was asking people if they knew any single people who were willing. And I had some wonderful friends who helped me out a lot. David did quite a bit. A lot of people helped me. And I felt better about that. It felt safer with a little personal recommendation. But even then, I started to exhaust everything. And I felt like I was begging on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. I was trying it all. And again, this was like how I would date, Like, I wouldn't date somebody on Craigslist, but I would date a friend of a friend. And then I thought about this time in my life when I had done online dating. And I was like, all right, let's try OkCupid. Let's see what happens. So you have to have a photo. I have a business card that says single, but they wouldn't take that, so I had to put a photo of myself up. And this is what the profile reads. It says, I'm a photographer, and I'm currently working on a long-term project on single people in NYC. There are more of us now than ever. I'm not looking for dates, but I'd love to take your photo and hear about your experience. We'll work together on the concept for the portrait and hopefully also end up with a new headshot for your own profile. Message me if you're interested, and I'll send you the link to my website and the work I've done so far. Cheers. I also put a link to the work just in case they couldn't manage all that. And there's all these questions on OkCupid that you're supposed to answer. I only did a couple, but I made sure it was all about photos. What I'm doing with my life, making photos. I'm really good at making more photos. I tried to make it crystal clear this was all about photos. Hello, I like your profile. You seem like someone I'd like to share some time with and get to know. I'd love to meet you in person. Let's see if we connect. I got a lot of these. I can tell from your profile we have a lot in common. I'm like, are you doing a project on single people too? Shit. Oh, sorry. I'd like to get to know you with little heart eyes emoticon. Next time, I'd like to get to know you. I got a lot like I don't know if they forgot that they've written. They just try again. I got a lot like that. This guy sent me several messages and several emails. And again, this is the guy you never want to date. Look at my photos. If you really think you can help me, I'm interested. This site is slowly draining my soul and making me feel more and more like the Elephant Man. Every woman's profile here says that what they are really turned on by is great manners, a world traveler, honesty, and a great sense of humor. They leave out that they want that from George Clooney. So already bitter, like he's screaming bitter. So I wasn't going to write him back from that. And then he sent me a bitter email. And then he sent me an angry email. And then he said, I'm guessing you're not interested in either using me or letting me hire you, but I had to tell you that on a dating site, to be blown off without even a, I'm sorry, project's done, or something, is a special kind of hell. Thanks. I was like, oh, honey, if you think that's hell, I know. And I'm like, that's your idea of hell? We can talk about what hell is, but this is like, this was my favorite. Hey, sorry. Huge mistakes, no longer has an account. I'm like, who would answer an ad from Huge Mistakes? And then finally, this is my whole philosophy about photography or anything. Tell your own story and you will be interesting. And that it doesn't have to be self-portraits like what I've done. It just has to be your own story that you tell in your own way. You could do street photography, and that's your own story if you're doing it your way. There's a million things you could shoot, but it has to be your story, and it has to be your way. And as we saw, that took me a long time to figure out. And I don't think it's something anybody figures out overnight. You've got to shoot a lot of garbage in order to get to the really original and interesting stuff. That's it.
So that was great. You sound just like you on a podium. Isn't that great? Mm-hmm. And your pictures tell a lot about you. I have a question about the singles thing, which I probably should know, but I don't. Are these people anonymous other than seeing them? Do you talk about who they are? Does that make sense? I mean, do you say their names?
Well, I imagine when the work, it's unpublished.
No, I get all that. And we'll talk about that later. No.
Yes, but but when
I'm just
it
wondering,
does
do you put
come
their
out,
names on it?
I will use their first names.
And they agreed to that?
It's like a caption on the photo you're talking about?
If I decide to do captions,
Because isn't it a weird
thing.
idea that they don't necessarily want their names on there, but to put their faces, or some of them?
Well, they've agreed to have their names
that's what I'm
on
curious
there.
about.
Yeah, and I have the releases. And again, that's why I have the written interviews, because I want people to know what about themselves is going to the world.
Sounds like a great book.
I agree.
Thank you for this, Jennifer. You said one thing that somebody said, just walk through the raindrops. And you're like, what the hell does that mean? But now you feel like you have an idea of what that does mean. What does it mean to you?
I'm still not entirely sure what it means, but I kind of figured out what it meant for me. And for me in that whole series, what the water represented was going in too deep with people. I'm not going to be able to explain this correctly at all. This is why the pictures work. And I I forget who it was where somebody asked him to explain a photo, and he said, "You want me to tell it worse?" I can't remember who that was. But for me, that meant finding a way to walk through with, and not go back to that kind of trauma. Does that make sense? Like, it's there, but you don't have to go there all the time. You could see it there next to you, but you can walk between all that stuff. Does that make sense at all?
That's good.
Okay.
That was excellent. Nobody could tell it worse. That was
Okay.
Jennifer, just roughly how long have you been working on this series and the other series? How long does it usually take from beginning to end? Or could you just describe that process a little bit?
Yeah, my hit list seems to be about 3 years. And I don't plan it that way, but you know how it is sometimes. You get to the end of a project and you just know that you're done. And it's a really weird feeling. And there's sometimes as you're shooting where you're like, I'm so ready to be done, but you don't feel it in your bones that you're done. And then every now and then you just take a certain kind of shot and you're like, now I'm done. And then there's a whole different set of work that comes after you're done with the shooting part,
So can I ask you how many single people you photographed?
Roughly right around 50.
And I presume you have multiple photographs from each person.
I do.
And do you know how many people are going to actually end up in the edited series? You don't know yet.
I don't know. It's so hard to say because there are some that I love and that I adore that didn't quite make this particular edit. And it's the kind of thing where it depends on the format that you're showing it in. Online is one kind of format. There's a certain attention span. I'm going to a portfolio review next week. That's a different kind of format. That's 20 to 25. Then you have a book format. And then you have free reign. You can do whatever you want for a book format. And, we're human beings. We're people. And being single is a complex issue. It's not ever just a person smiling. There's also a picture of her on the stairs who's really sad about it, People are complex, and sometimes it does take more than one portrait to tell the whole story.
And were the dates a particular amount of time, each one, but the same amount of time, or do they vary?
It varied. Some people I would spend hours with, again, like a date, and other people I couldn't get out of there fast enough.
Thanks.
So the single series, as it now is completed, how has it changed you? How do you view being single, if you still are single, and from how you began this concept to where you are today?
It was really interesting. I don't want to get too self-helpy on the whole thing because, again, it's a complex issue. And one day I would be very, very happy about being single. And the next day I'm curled up in a ball on the floor and crying that I'm going to die old and alone. But this project was great to talk to other people. And again, it was that thing where I was focusing on a lack instead of focusing, I was focusing on an absence instead of a presence, if that makes any sense. So I was able to appreciate all of the positives the more I talked to people about it. There were just things I didn't see before. And the more research I did about it, and the more I realized how many people are single and how so many of these ideas we have are completely wrong. And also when I was talking to a lot of these single people, and we'd have conversations, and I would hear some of the things that they would say about themselves. Because we all do it. We all have these voices in our head, and, you tell one day you're like, nobody's ever going to love me, there's something wrong with me. And when you say it to yourself, it sounds perfectly rational. When you hear someone else say it out loud about themselves, you're like, you're absolutely crazy. Why do you talk to yourself that way? So it was important for me to learn just how I talk to myself. That was a little self-helpy, sorry.
How big a role does New York City play in the singles series?
I think it plays a pretty big role. I tried to get quite a bit of New York in there because I think New York is its own special beast. And a lot of people said that in their interviews. that this city was different than wherever it was they moved from. And they say you come to this city and you can lose yourself in your career, and that's acceptable. Nobody notices. You don't notice. If you were in a small town in Illinois and you were one of the only single people living by yourself in your apartment, it's just a different thing. New York, you can be more anonymous.
Maybe
that
an
it?
extension of that is, what are some of the things you look for in your edit as you're going through these portraits? What are some of the things that signal a better shot than another?
That's a very good question. When I first started shooting, I was very literal. If somebody said that they felt the most single when they were at a bar, I would go into a bar and shoot them with a beer at a bar. And a lot of those ended up getting taken out entirely. And we started going towards the one that had a little more mystery to them and a little more enigma, I forgot the second part of the question.
Well, as you go through a situation.
Yeah.
As you go through a situation, where is the success as a photographer? Do you look for, is it more of a formal quality, or is it really about intimacy, or what do you privilege in your editing?
The intimacy and the mystery. And I do like a little ambiguity. I didn't want this story to come out with an ending. I didn't want it to be being single is great or being single sucks. I didn't want either one of those. And the editing part is really, it's interesting how just like a turn of a shoulder can change an entire photo, and you can see I'll be honest. So the very last photo is of me. And I've never, when I took those photos, I didn't take them with the intention of them being a part of this project. And I'd never done nude photos of myself. And there were a ton of them in there that we could have possibly chosen. And in this one, you can see some of my body parts that I'm not necessarily comfortable with, and people in my life aren't necessarily comfortable with. And we looked at every other possible photo from there just to see which one would work. And there are just slight differences and slight turns of the body, and it's so crazy because when you know, you know.
Can you talk a little bit more about the use of we in this contest? Is you and...
Well, I'm not single anymore.
What? I'm betrayed.
Yeah, it's funny. It's hard because I am going to be showing this work for the first time, and when I was shooting it, I was. And that was a connection that we had together, is that we all related. And I do feel like it's another reason why it's now over.
Don't you think that's interesting?
Yeah.
I mean, really?
Right?
Yeah.
But I have to be honest about what I'm saying and what I'm shooting. And it's just a different dynamic, it's different now.
I was wondering if there's if you can talk about what keeps you going. Like, is there these sound like really long projects, and there's a moment in them where I know there's times you just sort of feel like giving them up. So, is there something that keeps that moving?
Sheer stubbornness, pretty much. I mean, I don't, again, these are some of the questions that keep me up at night. And if I don't finish the project, then they're going to continue to keep me up at night. Because it's always a question that's burning in my head. And if I don't get to the bottom of it, then it's still going to sit there. It's still going to come up at me. And there's a great quote by Robert Adams. by Robert Adams. And he's talking about how this profession is pretty short on dignity, and you get bumped, and you get bruised, and you get knocked down, and you get rejected. And, why on earth would you keep going? And then he says, well, why quit when you're losing? And that's kind of how I feel. Like, well, why quit? Just keep going.
Thank you so much for a great lecture.
Thank you.